Yesterday morning, a 63-year-old man was crossing the street in Little Neck, Queens, and he was struck and killed by the Q79 bus. You ever think of writing your own eulogy? In fact, when I lost my job in banking in 1993, one of the pieces of advice that I got before I spent 5.5 years in therapy was to write your own eulogy, to kind of do a self-evaluation. And I was thinking about that this morning because I heard on the radio on 970 FM, which is a great place to get speech topics and things for table topics, I heard them interviewing Debbie Carter, the public information officer at Hillsborough Sheriff's Office. And she was talking about a deputy by the name of Longway. You might have read the article in yesterday's paper, struck and killed by a tractor trailer as he was on his way back from the port of Tampa. What was kind of interesting to me is that the Jack and Ted and Allison said, "Oh, he's a hero." And then we started to talk to Debbie Carter. Now, why was he a hero? Well, he was a hero because he was in Vietnam. He was also a hero because he spent 6 years in the Hillsborough Sheriff's Office. But it sort of came in my mind that why are our heroes always dead? And isn't there a little bit of a hero in each of us? What was interesting to me as well was, how did he become a sheriff? When he was in the 6th grade, a deputy from Hillsborough Sheriff's Office came in, you know, like that great American teach-in. He came in to talk on Career Day, and he gave each of the kids a deputy badge. And he decided that day in the 6th grade that he wanted to be a Hillsborough sheriff. It was kind of the beginning of developing the hero within him. And then when I think about my own life, and I look back and think, who are the heroes in my life? It would certainly be my father. And when I look back on my father's life, he led a life of simple generosity. One of the things that I recall that he did is he was a member in our church of an almsgiving group that was called St. Vincent de Paul Society. And now that I work for a nonprofit and tell people about the causes of kids that are runaways and kids who are homeless and kids who are abused, and I try to get their generosity, I think about the fact that life can change dramatically in a single moment. And an example of that for me was one time my father went out at night, and he would never tell me the details of his calls in the community, but when he came back I said, "Well, Dad, what did you do tonight?" He said, "Well, we went up to the apartments." There was an apartment complex about 3 or 4 blocks from where we lived. And he said, and there was a man there who had lost his job. And what we did is we gave him $50 for Thanksgiving, and so that he could buy some presents for his kids at Christmas. But what that message said to me is, you never know when you might be that person that needs a helping hand. Another thing that my father did that I will always remember is I was going to an aunt's funeral. We went to the funeral home, and it was a kind of Irish funerals. I learned that what happened is the guys would go in, say a prayer or two, and then they would go to the bar, which I think is a great way to deal with funerals if you're not Jewish and just bury people and then have a party afterwards. But there was one of the funeral parlors where there was no one there. And my father said, "Come on, let's go in." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, let's say a prayer for this guy. He's got nobody to pray for him." And I thought that really resonated with me. Kind of the idea that there's always people out there that are worse off than us, even when they're dead, and that we have to remember them. You know, we have to remember them, and we kind of have to help them. And one of the reasons why I'm thinking about that right now is that my mother-in-law Lucy is in hospice, Hernando Pasco Hospice, which is a fantastic place because it's somewhere that the family gets relief. Only problem is, she's overstaying her welcome. She went in 2.5 weeks ago, and at that time, my mother, my wife, and my siblings were told, "You better prepare. If you don't have all your things in order, you better do them now." She probably has 24 or 48 hours to live. So that was, you got 2.5 days, and now she's at 91, dealing with breast cancer, 2.5 weeks. And you know, they might actually have to put her in a nursing home. We're kind of keeping our fingers crossed that isn't what happens. But what's interesting is how my wife and I are dealing with it. I mean, she is someone who had a relationship with her mother. Her mother was somewhat distant. I think her mother might have even had maybe some mental health issues. And what was interesting to me is when you lose your parents, whether you're 15 or 50, when you lose that last parent, I've heard it said, you're an orphan now. And you know, sometimes somebody who has both of their parents or can't relate to that think it maybe is kind of exaggerated. But in reality, when you do lose that last parent, you are on your own more than you ever were before. And my wife said, well, I've been an orphan since I was about 7 or 8 years old. She actually more or less raised her younger brothers and her younger sister. But what we said while we're having coffee, which is one of the reasons why I sometimes don't come to Toastmasters, is because I have coffee with Tina. But she said, what I learned from that really is to live every day, to value what we have here in Florida, whether it's the weather, whether it's sitting on the lanai, whether it's drinking coffee, to just value every day. And when I'm thinking about my own life, you know, there's that great poem, the Dash, which is written, was actually the eulogy of someone who had died, and what he said really was, you know, she was born in 1914 and she died in 1992, and what's really important is the dash, because there's always that dash in between. Mm-hmm. How do you live your dash? And were I to think that my eulogy was real, or one of the real, I guess, problems of being a Toastmaster is you can't deliver your own eulogy. Mm-hmm. But were my son to maybe be saying something about me on that occasion, you know, he might have said something that I was a pretty good dad, might have mentioned that that I was a Toastmaster addict, even though he's never come to a single meeting. Might have mentioned that even at the age of 63, I'm still playing softball twice a week with a bunch of young guys. And then I'm wondering, what else might he say about me? Well, what he will be able to say about me is that I started to maybe live my dash more fully, because in November I'm going to be going with the Trinity Rotary to a project called Pure Water for the World. And I'm going to spend a week in Honduras. Now, my only regret is that I got 3 D's and a C in Spanish, so I got to get myself one of those little conversational dictionaries. But I think it's going to be something that will be very empowering. I think it'll be a chance, because I know for myself, when I read articles in the paper, other than obituaries, when I read articles in the paper, I always say, well, why don't they do something about that problem? Or why isn't there more people who care about X? And Pure Water for the World, which is something that was actually put together by Rotary, has been building purification systems in the rural part of Honduras. And I think they have a goal of about 95, and they built about 85 of them. And when I signed up to do this, and you have to pay for it out of your own pocket, I did ask the coordinator at our Rotary, do I actually have to know anything? He says, no, you just have to be willing to help. And so, you know, that's the story of my trip. The Q79, by the way, isn't a place where I'm going to be hit by the bus, because unfortunately I read that in July, a cutback in the transit system in New York because of budgets, the Q79 was eliminated. Thank you.